Hi everyone, Joe Garth here, creator of Brushify. Today I'd like to introduce our latest product, the Brushify Floating Islands pack for Unreal Engine 5. In this video, I'm going to be showing you the various features of the Floating Islands pack, and how you can use it to create your own imaginative scenes in Unreal Engine 5. Floating Islands contains an array of ready-made assets, including prefabs for the floating islands themselves, as well as detailed rocks, plants, and distant mountains. These tools allow you to create similar landscapes of your own. The package comes with a ready-made example level that showcases how these assets can be used to build a functional and immersive scene. You can even edit the landscape on top of a floating island, as it's still using Brushify's auto material. And later on, I'm going to show you how you can set that up in your own level. Additionally, the pack features advanced options, like a custom sky dome, and weather effects, like animated clouds, which you can quickly implement into your own levels. I hope you guys enjoyed that overview of the product. In this next part, I'm going to be showing you how you can create your own floating island scene, and also how you can actually create your own playable landscape on top of the floating islands themselves. Alright, let's get started. So now we have a basic overview of all the different components here. We can actually start to use these to build out maybe our own little floating island scene, or kind of an array of floating islands. So I'm going to do it here in the asset zoo and just sort of show you how I'd go about that. So obviously you could just copy these prefabs right here and copy and paste them from existing stuff in the asset zoo. But the way you'd actually load these into your level, if you want to do it from scratch, is just go to the content browser, go to Brushify, meshes, floating islands. And you can see there's floating islands 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and 0, 4. We're going to go to 0, 1. And inside of 0, 1, you can see there's a sort of blueprint class here. And I can actually drag and drop that into the world, just onto any other object. And then you'll see that's all of the objects there, even though there's many objects in that blueprint. They're all coming in at the same time. So once you've done that, of course, you can just drag and drop these in. And they're all slightly different variations and different versions. And you can put them anywhere you like in space. What I'm going to do is probably just remove some of these. You can see here that one's actually got a playable landscape on top of it. We're also going to delete that. Later on in this video, I'm going to show you how you can set up a sort of playable landscape like this one. Let me just go back to show you what that looks like. But yeah, you can see how this has actually got like a kind of cut out playable landscape on the top of it. But yeah, you can see how that's actually set up, how you get a sort of circular landscape. I'm going to delete that all for now. And then, yeah, let's maybe delete out some of these assets too, because we don't need those. Let's leave this vine in. The vine you can also find in, if you go to dressing, vines. So that's, yeah, content, Brushify, meshes, floating islands, dressing, vines. You can also find a blueprint here that you can drag on. So yeah, once you have this sort of spline, you can then use that to kind of string it between two different floating islands. So let's, for example, get this one. Let's just select that, move it down a little. Then we'll get this one, maybe put it, I don't know, somewhere like there. And we can take this spline here, and we can actually, I'm just going to close the content browser so we see this a little bit better. So yeah, we get this maybe like that, two floating platforms next to each other. I'm going to move this one down somewhere. Oh, sorry, that's one thing you have to worry about, is maybe don't accidentally click on one of the objects within the blueprint. Make sure you just click on the overall blueprint to move everything. It can be quite annoying sometimes if you accidentally click something inside of the blueprint. But yeah, I'm just going to move that out of the way. And then here we can get my little spline, and we can select one end of it. And I'm just going to move it. As you're moving it, it is a bit slow because it's kind of like basically squidging the mesh, and it's got a little bit of calculations to do. That's just because it's got like quite a lot of foliage on it and stuff like that. So it's not very particularly fast when you're moving the splines around, but obviously once they're in place, you're basically okay. I think I'm going to maybe reduce the height a little bit there. This is a little bit too much of a steep angle. And try and just get like a natural angle there. So it's a bit of a back and forth, but yeah, I'm going to get the spline and I'm going to kind of usually what I do is sort of bury it in some of the other foliage. So like here's a good example. I can kind of just tuck it away inside of this, and then it just looks like it's kind of forming part of that. Kind of gets hidden by that big bush, and that nicely blends it in. So yeah, that's how you do sort of like little floating island scenes. Obviously then you just end up, you know, repeating more of these. And obviously if you want to create also like a landscape, that's possible too. To do that, instead of setting up from scratch, I'll actually show you how it's been set up in the example level. So it's a little bit quicker. So I'm not going to save this. I think it's just a good demonstration of how you can set up the floating islands yourself. But yeah, if we go into the example level here, you can see I've actually set up this kind of landscape on the floor. It's basically just a 2K landscape with Brushify applied to it. It's got some sort of bumpy alpha brush noise, you know, just the typical way that you'd create, you know, Brushify landscape. And then I've just added these sort of large rock formations here. I think one thing that might help was actually to disable the atmospherics, just to show you. So we've got these fog cards, which are kind of like filling the whole scene. They add like a little bit of extra fog detail. So I'll disable all those for now, just so you can see it. And I'll also disable the height fog as well. And this looks really ugly, of course. It's not really designed for this. But yeah, you can see basically how I've set up this landscape. It's basically just a bunch of these sort of trees, these large sort of towers, which are kind of just sticking up everywhere. And obviously once you put the fog there, it gives this nice atmospheric depth to the scene. And of course, because the mountains are going so far into the distance, and they're sort of also covered by the fog, yeah, you can sort of see the that effect. There's also, in the very, very far distance, you can actually see these mountains are basically just little meshes. These are distance meshes, and I actually include one of those in the pack. So you can actually just use those to kind of dress the very, very far distance with at least some mountains, you know, that look like there's more terrain going on over there than there really is. But yeah, that's pretty much how the example level's set up. And yeah, the sky dome is basically just the same, you know, generic Brushify sky dome that comes with all the packs. In this next section, I'm going to show you how you can set up a playable landscape on top of one of the floating islands. So the very first thing you're going to do is construct a scene like this, which is actually just the asset zoo with all the objects deleted. So I'm just going to show you how you can actually do that. If you go to Content Browser, and we're going to go to Brushify, Maps, Floating Islands, Asset Zoo. Just going to load that. You can just go in here now, and actually there's already an example of a floating island with a playable landscape on top of it at the very far back here. So you can see that and how it's all set up. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to start from scratch, and I'm just going to delete all the other objects from the scene, just to make a sort of empty scene, so we can kind of begin from the very beginning. Not going to delete the sky dome and the lighting, because I think they look nice and pretty. So then the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to bring in the, if we go to Content, Brushify, Meshes, Floating Islands, Floating Island 1, I'm going to actually bring in a preset or prefab for Floating Island Mesh. And just drag and drop that into the scene. I'm just going to pull it back a little bit so it's kind of somewhere more normal. And this is actually, yeah, sort of a floating island object that's kind of a combination of different objects. So as you can see, you've got the kind of vines, you've got these kind of stalactites, and you've got these sort of hanging vines and things. But on the top of it, you can see it's just this kind of flat plane, which is pretty boring. We would really want to have some sort of nice kind of playable landscape there. So to do that, you're going to want to come to selection mode, go to landscape, and in here usually you'll just have these completely blank, like material slot will be blank, all these will be kind of set to the default settings, and you'll have this little landscape here that you can kind of move around. what we're going to do is we're going to position this so that it's kind of directly above the top of my floating island. So use the little gizmos and kind of put that in the center of your floating island. As you can see, this is a bit too big. So what we can do is we can actually go to this place where it says section size. I'm going to turn this down to 31. This will make it sort of roughly half the size of what it was before. And if you want to make this really, really precise, you can go to perspective at the top here and click top. And if you zoom out enough, you can actually see where it's in the level. And we can start to move this over the top of our floating island and very precisely put it right in the middle. So what is the goal of this? Basically, we've got this playable landscape, but obviously this is a square and this is a circle. So it's a square peg in a round hole, to use the old saying. And what we need to do is then we need to actually shave off the corners of this square so that it perfectly fits the top of this this sort of prefab mesh. I'm going to also make sure that it kind of intersects right at the very, very top of it. Something like that, I think. A little bit further down. Okay, that should do. And then I'm going to actually give this, before I create it, I'm actually going to give this a material mi_landscape. You can just search for that, or actually even better, I'll just show you where it is. If you go to Content Brushify, Materials, Landscape, and then inside of the Presets folder, you'll be able to find all these different presets with different sizes. I'm going to use the smallest one, which is 505. And I'm just going to drag and drop that onto Material. And that's that setup. So once you look at your settings, make sure you're happy with them all. Click on Create. And this has now created a sort of Brushify landscape, a typical Brushify terrain. And we can go to the Paint menu. We can actually fill this with grass by either create your own new layer info or just select one of the existing ones that's in the project. There should be one in Materials Landscape Layer Infos. So right there, just click it. And then if you look, you've now got the grass material on the landscape with all the grass showing up. So the next step is to obviously shave some of these corners. And to do that, we're going to go to Sculpt. We're going to go to Visibility. And then if you click on the landscape with that on, you can see that it creates holes in the landscape. What we're going to do is we're going to actually have to work with both these tools at the same time. So we can kind of obviously create, the kind of corners like this, but then you've got this kind of horrible edge here. So what we're going to want to try and do is we're going to want to use this Sculpt tool. And I'm going to kind of sculpt into the landscape there. And I want to create basically an edge like this, where it kind of transitions from playable landscape from that kind of rock. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Flatten tool. And I'm going to use the Flatten tool a little bit higher than the landscape. And then I'm going to kind of create this flat area here. But I don't want to go over this area here. I want to kind of create the transition up here. So the transition should be up here, and then down here all this should be flat. And then when you go to the Visibility tool, you can now shave away all that excess, and now you've got, as you can see, a kind of nice round edge. And you have another issue here, which is that the grass will show up even though we've kind of lost the real terrain. So to deal with that issue, you'll need to go to the Paint menu and scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says Remove Procedural. And make sure you give that a layer info. It can be any of them, but maybe use one that's saved in your own level. And this is basically just a layer info with, and this is very important, the No Weight Blend tick box is checked. And this will stop you from having... stop the brush from basically just painting black on the landscape, and it will actually just remove the grass. So as you can see, when I paint this down, and just rebuild the grass, you can see now that big area of grass is now missing. It suddenly just stops. So what you want to do is you want to actually take those areas that you've removed the terrain from, and you'll paint that down, and it removes all the grass from those areas. And now you can see we don't have grass there anymore. Got to make sure you go right to the very edge, otherwise it'll show up. Also, make sure your tool strength's on 1. That can be some reason why it doesn't work sometimes. And if you do also go over a bit too much with these tools, you know, for instance, say you accidentally delete a bunch of grass here on the actual playable landscape and you want to get that back, you can just go to hold shift and then paint back on it again, and now you've got all your grass and rocks spawning back again. And the same thing goes if you go to the sculpt menu to the visibility tool. Same thing goes for that. If you accidentally remove too much, you can go shift and then hold it and then add some back, or if you know, for instance, do something like that, you can delete it. So shift will undo and normal click will do, basically. And yeah, basically now the task is just to sort of go around your entire landscape, kind of setting up everything for this playable landscape. So usually what I do is I go around first with the visibility tool, making sure everything on the edge is invisible, like this. And obviously I don't go too far in, because you want to maintain some landscape on the top there. But yeah, I basically just do that all the way around. And I'll show you what I do after that. I usually go into doing the sculpting work. So just make sure the edge is nice and clean. And then now we can basically go in and decide the parts of the landscape that we're going to need to have terrain on, playable terrain on. So I'm going to select again the flatten tool, and I'm just going to go in and we can start flattening areas on there that we need the real terrain on. And this will make really nice smooth edges. Probably want to make the outside first, because this is the kind of hard part that requires a little bit of precision, and once we get inland it's not really necessary anymore. I might have messed up a little bit here because if you can see, I've actually need to pump up the sculpt. I need to go in the sculpt and like make it a little bit higher. Let's maybe go to flatten and then make that a little bit higher there for that area, just for that one area where the mesh was a little bit higher up. And yeah, now we've got basically all of the edge done around. I'm gonna just make a little bit of a bigger brush size and then just fill in every single thing here. Here we go. Perfect. And now we've got a sort of floating island with a playable landscape in the middle of it. Just gonna fill in that last little bit. And if I actually go in and you know, so scrutinize this, I can actually do any of the normal things that I do on a normal Brushify landscape. So if I, you know, sculpt down, the only problem with this is if you sculpt down too far, you will find the top of that mesh. That is a slight limitation. But you know, if you just create more sort of normal landscape, like up like this, yeah, you can basically just build a normal Brushify landscape or terrain. I'm going to go to the third-person game mode and run around a little bit just to show you that this is just like any other Brushify landscape now. And obviously you can use all the procedural tools on this. You can use all of Brushify's features just as you normally would with any other landscape. The exception being that when you zoom out, all of that's on top of this big floating island. Now, if you do notice any other issues, you know, just make sure you go around the outside and clean up the grass issue as well. This is another, you know, thing that just takes a little bit of time. Just got to go in, and it's a bit annoying because you're sort of blind. You've got to kind of, you know, blindly go in and make the brush size big. But once you get the trick, it's just you know, going over this area, and you can make the brush size actually much bigger with this one. It's not such a big deal to kind of do that, and that then just, you know, that's removed all of that grass that's floating around that entire area. So it's a little bit of trial and error, and just making sure you kind of, you know, set everything up right. But yeah, these tools are really, you know, quite dynamic, and you only really need to do this once. So, you know, once everything's already set up, you're basically good from that point on. Alright, so I hope you guys found that tutorial useful, and yeah, that's pretty much how you can create playable landscapes on top of your floating islands. Alright guys, I think that's just about everything from my side. I really hope that you find this product useful, and I hope it helps you out with your Unreal Engine projects. As usual, all of the Brushify packs are available on Unreal Marketplace, and they're all compatible with Unreal Engine 5. Lastly, I just wanted to give a big thanks to everyone for your continued support of Brushify, and also good luck with your own projects on Unreal Engine. Cheers guys.